These are the stories making the headlines at this hour. South Korea's consumer prices in November were up 3.3% in another on-year increase despite slowing from the month before. Authorities vowed to stabilize prices with a discounted cashback campaign for agricultural and energy products. President Yoon nominates 6 new ministers, including a new finance minister. Most are scholars and experts rather than career politicians. This as most of the incumbents are likely to run for parliament next year, with more nominations to follow soon. After taking control of northern Gaza, Israeli forces are pushing deeper into the south. Israel's defense minister says its military won't leave Gaza until all Hamas infrastructure is eliminated. Good afternoon. South Korea's economy expanded by 0.6% in the third quarter on a recovery in the chip industry and exports. National income also saw a rise thanks to improvements in trade. An Sung-jin reports.
South Korea's preliminary real gross domestic product for the third quarter of 2023 has increased by 0.6% compared to the previous quarter. Data from the Bank of Korea on Tuesday noted that this figure was consistent with the advanced estimate released in October. The increase in the third quarter was mostly driven by a recovery in the chip industry. This helped pull up the manufacturing sector, which grew by 1.4% as production for computers, electronics, and optical products rose. This also pushed up exports by 3.4% on quarter. Private consumption also saw a 0.3% increase as spending on food services, accommodation, and cultural activities increased. The quarterly GDP growth rate for this year has maintained a similar rate of increase, lingering above the baseline of 0%. Meanwhile, real gross national income increased by 1.6% in the third quarter compared to the previous quarter. Although the net factor income from outside of Korea decreased, as the terms of trade improved, the GNI saw a larger increase rate than real GDP. The Bank of Korea issued its preliminary quarterly estimates on the country's real GDP and income within 70 days of the end of the quarter, with the finalized data expected to be issued within the next year and a half. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
President Yoon has plans to level up support for South Korea's export firms to expand in the global market. At a ceremony marking the nation's 60th trade day on Tuesday, Yoon reflected on the decades of the country's growth in annual exports, which first recorded $100 million in 1964. Having met with over 90 heads of state around the world in 150 summits, the president said he will keep promoting South Korea's exports as the country's #1 salesman by backing free trade agreements and efforts to diversify products and services, as well as encouraging the growth of small and mid-sized companies along with young business people through regulatory reform. Amid global trade uncertainties, South Korea is forecast to record around $630 billion in exports this year, down 7.8% from last year. South Korea's foreign exchange reserves increased in November for the first time in 4 months. Data from Bank of Korea on Tuesday shows the nation's foreign reserves, a barometer of financial stability, stood at $417 billion at the end of November. That is up just over $4 billion from the previous month, rising for the first time since the end of July. This increase has been linked to the drop in the strength of the greenback, with the dollar index falling by 3.2% last month, boosting the converted value of non-dollar assets. As of the end of October, South Korea is the world's 9th largest holder of foreign reserves. South Korea's consumer prices in November were up 3.3% in another on-year increase, despite slowing from the month before. Authorities have vowed to stabilize prices with a discounted cashback campaign for agricultural and energy products. Park Gun-woo has more.
South Korea's consumer prices went up again on year last month. According to data released by Statistics Korea on Tuesday, the Consumer Price Index, a key gauge of inflation, rose 3.3% year-on-year in November. That was the fourth consecutive month South Korea saw a jump in consumer prices of over 3%. But compared to the month before, consumer prices fell, mainly due to lower gasoline prices. Improved supply of agricultural products thanks to favorable weather in November was also a factor that pushed consumer prices down on month. However, sectors including service, agricultural goods, industrial goods, and energy all saw price hikes compared to November 2022. In an emergency economy meeting on Tuesday, Finance Minister Chu Kyung-ho discussed ways to deal with increasing prices, but added Korea's consumer prices are stable compared to other regions including the US and EU.
As unstable conditions, including oil prices and the weather, continue, we will do our very best to keep up with special policies to stabilize livelihoods in terms of consumer prices.
The minister also said that the government will strengthen support, particularly for agro and livestock prices, which are still high, with larger discount and cashback schemes until the end of the year. Chu also spoke about ways to relieve the burden of energy payments, including tripling the money back in a gas fee cashback program and boosting energy-saving campaigns more widely. Park Gon-woo, Arirang News.
As part of its efforts to ease the burden of energy costs during the winter season, the government is pushing to provide support for small businesses in terms of bills and equipment. At an emergency economic meeting on Tuesday, the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy announced a proposal to allow small businesses to pay their gas and electricity bills in installments. A budget of 9 billion Korean won, or nearly $7 million has also been set aside for next year to help SMEs replace old equipment with more energy-efficient hardware. The government will also be implementing a cashback system for gas use, where households can get some money back if they reduce their gas uses by a minimum of 3% compared to the year before. President Yoon nominated 6 new ministers, including a new finance minister. Most are scholars and experts rather than career politicians. This as most of the incumbents are likely to run for parliament next year, with more nominations to follow soon. Kim Do-yeon reports.
President Yoon has nominated people for 6 out of 19 ministerial positions. The anticipated announcement came on Monday after the presidential office started major reshuffles last week. The upcoming general election next April is forcing current ministers who are looking to run for the National Assembly to resign their posts by January 11th, the cutoff date under Public Official Election Act. For Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Economy and Finance, the former Senior Secretary to the President for Economic Affairs, Choi Sang-mok, has been nominated to replace Chu Kyung-ho, a 2-term lawmaker who is seeking a 3rd. Choi worked closely with the presidential office and has been a big part of the Yoon administration's economic policies so far.
The nomination comes when there are unfavorable economic conditions at home and abroad, so I feel a great sense of responsibility facing the long road ahead.
The other nominations were also for ministerial posts having a direct impact on the country's economy. Former Korea Land and Housing Corporation CEO Park Sang-woo has been nominated as Infrastructure Minister, while Kang Do-hyung has been put forward to head the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries. To lead the SMEs and Startup Ministry, Oh Young-ju, who most recently served as Second Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs, has been nominated. Kang Jung-hae, a former president of Sookmyung Women's University, has been nominated as Minister of Patriots and Veterans Affairs, and Song Mi-ryung is looking to head the Ministry of Agriculture. It's also noteworthy that the nominations announced on Monday are all scholars and experts in their fields with no direct political experience, with the general elections coming up in April. In fact, the majority of the incumbents were already politicians when they were nominated. This is a trend likely to continue with more nominations yet to come. Justice Minister Han Dong-un is also being closely watched by the public. While he is a key man in the Yoon administration and a close confidant to the president, he could also be seeking to debut in politics. In addition, the Foreign Affairs Minister Park Jin is under scrutiny about his potential moves. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
The national security advisors of South Korea, the United States, and Japan are set to meet in Seoul this week to discuss ways to deal with North Korean threats and other regional geopolitical risks. South Korea's ambassador to the U.S., Cho Hyun-dong, said Monday local time that the Trilateral meeting is part of efforts by the three countries to strengthen cooperation following up the Camp David summit in August. He added that it's only natural for the three countries to respond jointly amid growing nuclear and missile threats from the north. His remarks come as Seoul's National Security Advisor Cho Tae-yong is scheduled to meet with his American and Japanese counterparts, Jake Sullivan and Takeo Akiba, on Friday and Saturday. South Korea has successfully conducted a third test flight of its solid-fuel space rocket, putting an actual satellite into orbit this time. The Defense Ministry is confident that the country is one step closer to solidifying its own space-based reconnaissance system. Pae-eun-ji tells us more.
A rocket blasts off into space from a barge floating in waters south of Jeju Island. At around 2 p.m. on Monday, South Korea launched a solid-fuel space rocket, the third test of its kind following two others in March and December last year. Unlike the first two tests, which carried dummy payloads, Monday's test involved an actual satellite, developed by the country's defense electronics company, Hanwha Systems. South Korea's defense ministry said the rocket placed a small satellite that weighs about 100 kilograms into orbit, at an altitude of about 650 kilometers, saying the country has taken a step closer to securing an independent space capability to put satellites into low Earth orbit. It also said the successful launch would accelerate the country's surveillance and reconnaissance capabilities, at a time when North Korea continues to threaten national security by launching a military spy satellite, violating UN Security Council resolutions. Monday's launch tested the first, third, and fourth stages of the rocket, ahead of the country's plan to conduct a full-fledged launch in 2025. The rocket, currently being developed by the state-run Agency for Defense Development, uses solid fuel for the first three stages and liquid fuel for the fourth. Solid fuel rockets are easier to store and handle and are cheaper to launch than liquid fuel ones. Although liquid fuel rockets are more expensive and difficult to store, they're capable of carrying heavier payloads. An official from the Defense Ministry explained that South Korea will be able to launch satellites weighing 500 to 700 kilograms once all four stages are developed. The official also explained that South Korea's solid fuel rocket technology is one of the best in the world, and that it can generate thrust force 1.5 times higher than that of rockets developed by North Korea. Amid growing nuclear and missile threats, South Korea aims to send a total of 5 reconnaissance satellites into space by 2025 to better monitor North Korea. Pae-eun-ji, Arirang News.
Washington says South Korea is not subject to UN Security Council sanctions after North Korea accused the U.S. of having a double standard over space programs. A spokesperson at North Korea's National Aerospace Technology Administration claimed Monday that the U.S. has a double standard over South Korea's spy satellite as it helps Seoul's launch while condemning the North's. But according to the U.S. Department of State spokesperson Matthew Miller on the same day, South Korea is not subject of multiple UN Security Council resolutions, unlike North Korea, for dangerous and destabilizing activities in the region. Miller added that the U.S. remains open to dialogue with the North and will welcome a peaceful resolution. After taking control of northern Gaza, Israeli forces are now pushing deeper into the south. Israel's defense minister says its military won't leave Gaza until all Hamas infrastructure is eliminated. Lee Seung-jae with the latest.
The Israeli military, which has taken control of most of the northern part of the Gaza Strip, is now quickly formalizing its ground offensives in the southern region. According to the AFP on Monday, dozens of Israeli tanks and heavy equipment were observed entering the area near Khan Yunis in the southern Gaza Strip on several occasions. Several witnesses in southern Gaza also told AFP that they've seen tanks and other armored vehicles moving towards southern Gaza, showing Israel is set to begin a full-fledged offensive in the region. In a statement released by Israel's defense ministry, Israeli Defense Minister gov't said Monday that the Israeli army will storm the entirety of Gaza City and the northern part of the Gaza Strip until all Hamas infrastructure is completely destroyed. He also said that the military will remain in Gaza until all Hamas infrastructure is eliminated, and went on to say that the military has begun to work in the south of the Gaza Strip. In the meantime, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said he was surprised by the resumption of hostilities between Israel and Hamas in the Gaza Strip and urged both sides to respect their obligations to comply with international humanitarian law. Guterres also expressed concern that people in Gaza had nowhere safe to go and appealed to Israel to avoid further action that worsens the already catastrophic humanitarian situation in the region. He added that civilians and civilian infrastructure, including medical staff, journalists, and UN personnel, must be protected at all times. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Now moving on to extreme weather conditions in parts of the globe. Moscow has experienced heaviest snowfall in 145 years, while in African countries like Tanzania and Kenya, heavy rain caused hundreds of casualties. Shin-young reports.
Heavy snowfall has struck the Russian capital, causing disruptions both on the roads and to flights at 3 Moscow airports, according to city officials on Monday. The depth of the snow on Monday exceeded 40 centimeters, marking a level unseen in 73 years. Authorities deployed over 135,000 people and around 8,000 pieces of equipment for the snow clearing effort. According to Russian Hydrometeorological Center, Moscow on Sunday posted a record for snowfall on the same day with 10.7 millimeters of snowfall in 12 hours. That marks the highest amount of snowfall recorded in the center's 145 years of weather observation. The previous record set in 1980 was 9.4 millimeters. The amount of snowfall is typically 1/10 of recorded snow depth.
I haven't seen snowfall like this in 20 years, or actually at all in my life.
Meanwhile, the Eastern Africa has been hit by unexpected floods. In Tanzania, heavy rain on Saturday was followed by landslides which claimed at least 57 lives. In Kenya, at the end of November, 120 people lost their lives due to the heaviest rainfall in a century, while in Somalia, over 100 people were killed because of adverse weather conditions. The eastern part of Africa has been grappling with severe droughts in recent years, but starting in October, heavy rain and floods attributed to the El Niño phenomenon have caused widespread disasters. Shin-young, Arirang News.
Let's take a look at what's going on in the world now. In Indonesia, Mount Merapi volcano in West Sumatra erupted on Sunday, leaving 11 dead and 12 missing. Rescue officials have resumed the search for the missing hikers, which had been suspended by a second eruption on Monday. There were 75 hikers, all locals, in the area at the time of Sunday's eruption. 49 were evacuated safely, and 3 others were subsequently found, with many of those evacuated suffering from burns. Mount Merapi, around 3,000 meters high, spewed a 3-kilometer ash cloud into the air on Sunday, blanketing the surrounding region in ash. It is one of the most active among Indonesia's 127 volcanoes, but remains a popular hiking destination. Merapi's deadliest eruption in 1979 resulted in 60 deaths. A former U.S. diplomat was charged on Monday with allegedly spying for Cuba for over 40 years. Former U.S. Ambassador to Bolivia, Victor Manuel Rocha, was arrested in Miami on Friday for crimes including acting as an illegal agent for a foreign government and using a fraudulently obtained passport. In what the Justice Department is calling one of the most brazen and longest-lasting infiltrations in the history of the U.S. Foreign Service, the 73-year-old allegedly engaged in clandestine activity on Cuba's behalf since at least 1981. For 2 decades, Rocha served top posts in Argentina and Cuba, as well as Bolivia. An undercover FBI agent allegedly reached out to Rocha, posing as a Cuban intelligence agent, which led to the discovery of his crimes. The English Premier League has agreed to a record-breaking $8.5 billion deal for domestic television rights for TV channels Sky and TNT. The deal will allow Sky and TNT to show up to 270 live games a season. The BBC will continue to show highlights of games on Match of the Day. The current $6 billion domestic broadcasting rights deal will expire at the end of the 2024-25 season. The Premier League said that the new agreement will provide financial certainty for clubs throughout professional football until at least 2029. A 70-year-old woman in Uganda gave birth to twins on Thursday following IVF treatment and became Africa's oldest mother. Safina Namukwaya successfully delivered a boy and a girl via caesarean section at the Women's Hospital International and Fertility Center in Uganda. The babies were born prematurely at 31 weeks and placed in incubators, but doctors confirmed that they were stable. It is her second delivery in 3 years after she gave birth to a girl in 2020. A 73-year-old Indian woman holds the record for being the oldest to give birth following IVF treatment in 2019. Kim Seong, Arirang News.
Good afternoon. The warming trend continues. After a mild start, highs will also be much warmer than norms this afternoon in most parts of the country. But of course, along with the warmer temperatures, the fine dust level will remain high. Central parts of the country, especially the capital area, will be trapped by high levels of dust all day, but the rest of the country should enjoy the warmth outside today. Meanwhile, East Coast regions are in the grip of dry air with a dry advisory remaining in place. Afternoon highs are 1 to 3 degrees higher than yesterday in most places in the teens. Mostly to partly sunny skies are expected for most areas, but Seoul will see more clouds than sunshine today. There could be a light mix of rain and snow tomorrow, but it won't affect the temperatures much. And look how pleasant the weather is going to be this Friday, seeing the highs of 15 degrees Celsius here in Seoul under sunny skies. So hopefully the air quality will be decent as well. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un was spotted shedding a tear as he addressed the regime's low birth rates at the National Mothers Meeting. Kim seemingly caught in emotions, saying that he always thinks about mothers when he has a hard time. Then he called on women to have more children, saying it is every household's duty to tackle low birth rates. The average North Korean woman gives birth to 1.8 children, twice as many as in the South. But North Korea is expecting its population to shrink in 10 years, a potential threat to the labor-dependent economy and the regime as a whole. While a set of incentives are being rolled out, Kim Jong-un himself also made repeated public appearances with daughter Jue, perhaps in his efforts to encourage families too. That is all for today. Thanks for watching.